So, like many Warhammer fans, one of my most anticipated games of 2024 has been Space Marine 2. And I personally have tried to go into the game without knowing too much about it going in, so I can be surprised by what I see. And now that the game's finally out, here are my thoughts. So I'd say it's pretty good. However, I want to be upfront, I did have some issues with PvP servers, but I believe that has been sorted out now.
Let me break it down for you, Mark.
So, Space Marine 2 has three primary game modes: the campaign, operations, which is PvE, and Eternal War, which is PvP. Now, I would like to go into full detail about the campaign mode, but I haven't finished it at the time of recording myself, and also I would like to save going over it for when it's less spoilery, if that's okay. So, the basic setup of the game is that the giant space bugs of death have invaded several Imperial worlds, and it is up to the Ultramarines, or whatever OC chapter you make, to stop them. Don't lie to me, I know you have a homebrew chapter. So without further ado, let's talk about the classes. So, Space Marine 2 has 6 classes, all of which can be used in PvE missions or PvP. So let's start off with the first class, the Tactical Marine. The Tactical Marine is the most well-rounded class out of the 6 that are currently in the game. Its loadout is essentially the standard for every class. You have a primary weapon, a secondary weapon, and a melee weapon. Each class also has a special ability, and a Tactical Marine's special ability is to highlight enemies so you can deal extra damage.
Activating all status advanced.
The Tactical Marine is a good generalist class, being able to fight at close and mid-range pretty well, and is a great example of the core mechanics of the game. So that about wraps it up for Tactical Marine, so let's move on to the next class, the Assault class.
Moving to objective. Acknowledged. Proceeding to relay.
The Assault class is the second class we'll be talking about, and unlike the Tactical Marine, it doesn't have a primary weapon. But unlike the Tactical Marine, it gets access to a lot more melee weapons. And if that wasn't enough, the Assault class special ability is to fly up into the air and slam into the ground, because Jesus fuck does that do a lot of damage.
That's a lot of damage!
Essentially, the role of the Assault class is to drop in and fuck shit up.
To relay. Range.
And I'd say it gets the job done. The Vanguard class has this pretty similar loadout to the Tactical Marine, except your focus now is on ripping and tearing the enemies. Now, the Vanguard class does have some differences from the Tactical class. For example, most of its weapons are automatic. It also has weaker armor, only having 2 bars of armor instead of 3. And its main special ability is a grapple hook that lets you pull closer to enemies so you can 1v1 them. Out of all the classes, Vanguard is probably my second most played. My most played class is the Bullart class. The Bullart is essentially Space Marine 2's tank class. It loses the primary weapon slot, but in exchange you get a shield that can block incoming attacks. And for its special ability, you get a banner that recharges everyone's shields. But I'm gonna be completely real, this class just makes me want to blast power metal and just shout Deus Vult whenever I'm using it. And now to move on to the next class, the Sniper. The Sniper class is, as the name implies, a sniper, which means its role is primarily to stick in the back and use its powerful guns to do big damage to enemies. But it does have options for guns with slightly higher fire rates, and if you combine it with its unique ability of turning invisible, it can be pretty nasty. Which is why Sniper is my primary class in PvP. Anyway, we finally got into the final class that's currently in the game, which is the Heavy class. The Heavy class exists for 2 reasons: to shoot big guns and to deal big damage. As a Heavy, you're essentially a walking tank. And with their special ability Iron Halo, they can put up a force field. which is great for protecting your team and yourself. Well, since we're done finally talking about the classes, let's actually talk about the two major game modes, PvE and PvP. The PvE game mode is Operations, which is the mode I play the most. And an interesting thing about Operations mode is that the missions also occur alongside the main story. For example, in the second Operations mission, you have to kill a Tyranid Hive Tyrant, which later in the story, you actually see the moment when that Tyranid Hive Tyrant dies. And although when I started making this video, there were only 6 Operation missions available, as I was making it, a 7th one just came out, so there are likely going to be many more coming out in the near future. And Operations missions can be played on several different difficulties, which, trust me, are really hard at higher difficulties. But in Operations mode, you can also upgrade your weapons, and you gain perks which can give you extra abilities on top of your class's normal abilities. For example, the Bullart class gains the ability to res teammates by just dropping their banner. Now, let's move on to the PvE game mode, Eternal War. Eternal War is the PvP mode, which has 2 teams of 6 players going up against each other. And at the moment, you can only play 3 game modes: Capture Point, Capture Multiple Points, or Team Deathmatch. Now, besides being PvP, Eternal War has a few differences from Operations mode. For example, in Eternal War, there are no perks and you can't upgrade your weapons. In addition to this, you don't have access to all the weapons your class would have access to in Operations mode, and you actually have to work to unlock all the other weapons. And lastly, one group will be Loyalist Space Marines, while the other will be Chaos Space Marines, who will have different armor from the Loyalists. And god do I wish you could use some of these Chaos Marine armor parts in Operations mode. Like, seriously, these look so goddamn fucking cool! Well, anyway, I hope I gave you a good overview of the classes in this game and the different game modes, and I'm sorry I couldn't cover the story, but I will try and do that in the future. Anyway, this video took me ages to make, and I will probably hate it once it's done being edited, so see ya! Anyway, like and share if you actually like this, because I think I'm gonna try and do some other reviews.